gestures of recognition made from respect that demanded a response. But he was confused and disturbed by the fact, indisputable, overwhelming, that the unexpected visitor had swept from his mind the picture of his brother that he carried to the graveside. Though not certainly from the question that had tormented him for more than a week. How exactly did Abel die? What had his last hour been like? And why? Flemyng knew none of the pallbearers who lowered the coffin, letting the cords fall into the grave with a rattle on the wood as they stood back. The priest was finishing. "Lift us from the darkness of this grief." Heads were bowed. He had not known that Abel would choose to be buried in the old way, and was pleased by how much it consoled him. After the prayer he approached the priest, who put out both hands. "Ambassador." Flemyng hugged Hannah and the children again. He would go home with them to a house with no husband or father, but first he had to dispense comfort at the graveside. When he stepped back to let others approach as if he was in a receiving line, he turned naturally, without displaying anxiety, to look for the old man. He had gone. Puzzled, Flemyng got into a car with Hannah and the children, and it took them slowly towards the gates. A few cars followed them, in a small procession that would make its way across the river to Abel's house on 20th. The driver pulled up at a stoplight just outside the cemetery. As he did so, a black town car pulled out from the line behind them, the driver choosing just the right moment, and slowed down alongside in the next lane. Flemyng saw the rear window slide down, and a face turn deliberately towards him. He had his second shock of the day, this time in slow motion. Red-haired and lightly bearded, with features thinner and stretched by the years, his face was as familiar as a family photograph. Their eyes met, then the window went up again. That was all. The rain on the glass let nothing stay in focus. The traffic light changed, and the car was away. For 2 hours Flemyng offered comfort to the family, spoke about his brother to neighbours and friends, saw a few of his own. He had a few minutes on the phone to Francesca, in London with her 2 young sons who were changing schools, and she consoled him. He wondered about Maria, Abel's workmate and his own confidant, marooned in Poland or Czechia under the pretence of a journalistic life, but on the prowl. A new story was starting for him, he was sure, but his alarm didn't show to anyone who was there. Concealment was his nature. A couple of hours passed smoothly, helped along on the tide of sadness, then lifted at moments when the necessary release of tension allowed them to laugh. He had left his driver in town and made his own way to the cemetery with the family, leaving the instruction that he would see it through without an official presence at his side. No rigmarole today of all days, please. He'd also made an unusual arrangement for his return to Washington. They would drive all the way. The day was always destined to be difficult, and he preferred the privacy of the car to anything else. Now, dipping into the Lincoln Tunnel, he thought of the decision as providential. A few hours of undisturbed thought and solitude. Before they settled into silence and the slimy Jersey moonscape, his driver repeated the sympathies he'd offered that morning. He asked how the funeral had passed off. "As well as it could have, Gus, thank you," Flemyng said. "But a strange day indeed." The driver said he understood. A sad one. "No, not just the sadness," Flemyng said, with the sharpness his colleagues knew well. "You see, I've encountered a ghost. And not just one, but 2. Chapter 2. A few miles across the same city, on a barren street running straight towards the East River, any passer-by could tell that if the Star of the Sea had ever possessed a certain allure, it had evaporated. The place no longer pretended to offer a welcome, and instead set a stony face to the world, which, as far as it was concerned, consisted of a bleak corner of the South Bronx. Once upon a time you might have wanted to visit the bar. A few traces of happier times remained. Splashes of faded colour here and there spoke of lost days, even festivity. But the steel door to the street now had a peephole and a mosaic.